Hi, and welcome to another episode of Punk Rock Politics. I'm going to get right into it, but first I'm just going to say that there's a lot going on, concerns with friends, family from COVID-19, or the novel coronavirus, whatever you want to call it. And I apologize for not putting out videos in the last few days, but this is probably this is how it's going to have to be until I get some patrons to become members and I start reaching enough subscribers and viewable hours to be able to monetize my different pages, Patreon, YouTube, etc. Please go to YouTube and subscribe. Double click the button so you get the little bells around to make sure you get all updates of my new videos. And click all if you're on a laptop to make sure you get updates. Because if you don't click all on the subscription, you likely won't get any or many updates at all. It's a problem that's been going on for a while. So first, I'm going to give you an explanation that came out before, as this bill was being passed and considered. This third bailout bill, this so-called stimulus. Where everybody got the unemployment extensions. Not everybody, I wish. Where some people got unemployment extensions, etc. So first, I'm going to explain and read through an article that's fantastic and goes through how this is just the biggest robbery ever and giving out massive amounts of money from our tax dollars to large wealthy corporations so they can give buybacks and dividends to wealthy people with stock, which is increasingly a very small number of Americans, and give bonuses to CEOs and all that kind of stuff. So it's not exactly what the media was telling you, or the Democrats or the Republicans, for the most part. So first, we're going to get into this great article explaining what's wrong with the stimulus that just passed recently. That's taking forever to implement and actually get people money, and it's not getting everybody money that needs it, and or healthcare for that matter. And then it's going to I'm going to go get into, excuse me, I have CNN in the background and it's distracting me. Then we're going to get into what the bill means for you potentially, and if you can get money and when you may get money. And my subsequent videos will get into all kinds of stories, including Joe Biden's flops in the media, his issues speaking and showing cognitive decline, and that he's not fit to be president. Stories about how the DNC is thinking of floating Andrew Cuomo at the convention, which would be a disaster for many reasons. We don't need another dynasty politician, as I call them. Like multiple politicians in the family, and then they're just set up to be in power at all levels of government, but especially the presidency. You could see this with the Clintons and Bushes, etc. So, all right. Now, this is the article in the American Prospect, Unsanitized Bailouts, a Tradition Unlike Any Other, by David Dayen, Dayen. You should definitely check him out. March 25th, 2020 at 10:20 a.m. I'm going to put the link to this video at the bottom of the description so you can check it out yourself. But why not listen to my awesome voice tell it to you? First response. 12 years ago, banks asked for a bailout after years of irresponsible, highly leveraged lending. The Treasury Department put out a 3-page term sheet seeking money from Congress with no strings attached, even eliminating judicial review. Democrats balked, called it a slush fund, and worse, then agreed after a few mostly meaningless bits of oversight and some promises to help ordinary people. That $700 billion bailout was window dressing for trillions that came from the Federal Reserve, but it kept Congress quiet, hooking them into the rescue of the system. 12 years later, virtually the same course of events is taking place. After just a couple of weeks of extreme social distancing measures, the Treasury Department asked for a large bailout, this time of the entire corporate sector. The bill as written initially would have made all bailout activities secret for 6 months. Democrats balked, called it a slush fund and worse, and then agreed to a few mostly meaningless bits of oversight and some promises to help ordinary people. In fact, they're the same bits of oversight from the 2008 TARP bailout, a 5-member oversight panel and an inspector general for the program. The enormity of this bailout is being underreported. The number you're hearing is $500 billion. Of that, $75 billion goes to the airline industry and the mysteriously named businesses critical to national security. The other $425 billion helps capitalize a $4.25 trillion with a T leveraged lending facility at the Federal Reserve. The taxpayer dollars would soak up any losses from that lending program. The loans won't be secret anymore, but the oversight is largely after the fact, without subpoena power, and mainly reduced to writing reports. How exactly do you expect a small, underfunded panel to find fraud in a $4.25 trillion lending facility? especially when the current administration explicitly believes they are not required to turn over anything to Congress. So it's not a $2 trillion bill, it's closer to $6 trillion, and a $4.3 trillion of it comes in the form of a bazooka aimed at CEOs and shareholders with almost no conditions attached. At the moment, nobody's seen language, but there's apparently only a buyback ban for the term of the loan. The money cannon can therefore go to executive compensation or mergers or wholesale purchases of distressed businesses or whatever other financial engineering the accounting department can muster. And once the company returns to health, it can leak out cash to investors, and during the loan too, in dividends. There's no requirement to keep workers hired. In fact, the necessary provision to boost unemployment insurance for 4 months to 100% of median salary, including furloughed workers, gig workers, and freelancers, means that these companies can fire with relative impunity. Members of Trump's family can get bailout funds, so yay. This is a robbery in progress. And it's not a bailout for the coronavirus. It's a bailout for 12 years of corporate irresponsibility that made these companies so fragile that a few weeks of disruption would destroy them. The short-termism and lack of capital reserves funneled record profits into a bathtub of cash for investors. That's who's being made whole. Financiers and the small slice of the public that owns more than a trivial amount of stocks. In fact, they've already been made whole. Yesterday, Wall Street got the word that they'd be saved and stocks and bonds went wild. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, is running these bailout programs for the Fed and could explicitly profit if the Fed buys its funds, which it probably will. This is a rubber stamp on an unequal system that has brought terrible hardship to the majority of America. Again, this is a rubber stamp on an unequal system that has brought terrible hardship to the majority of America. The people get a $1,200 means-tested payment and a little wage insurance for 4 months. Corporations get a transformative amount of play money to sustain their system and wipe out the competition. Small businesses get their own program and can't participate in the $4.3 trillion bonanza. They get $300 billion, so do the math on who's supported more. They get forgivable loans if they keep staff on payroll. There's no such requirements for the corporates. While the Federal Reserve, which can transfer money from the cash cannon with ease, runs the corporate bailout, the hapless Small Business Administration will deal with the small businesses. They have been endlessly criticized for delays on their couple billion in loan guarantee programs, let alone $300 billion. The monopolists get concierge service, the small businesses get to take a number, and the result will almost certainly be massive concentration of power. There's also $150 billion for state and local governments and $130 billion for hospitals, though not much for actual equipment. It seems to fix certain existing problems with their businesses. Progressives I've talked to on the Hill are apoplectic. Temporary survival money for workers, trillions in permanent economic inequality, saving a bunch of executives and elites, said one House Democratic aide. There's particular anger reserved for the big show made of the House Democratic bill, a sideshow that never was part of the Senate side negotiation. During this month of unprecedented crisis, who's valued by Trump's cruel administration is becoming clearer than ever, said Maurice B.P. Weeks, co-executive director of Action Center on Race and the Economy. That's true, but it's also true of the entire political system, not just Trump. Democratic leaders exceeding to a Mnuchin-managed slush fund reveal themselves to be too tired and spineless to be entrusted with power, Jeff Hauser of the Revolving Door Project rightly states. This bill is an outrageous betrayal, a testament to how power works and saves itself, and Congress is about to put itself on the hook for it. Schumer has the Senate under his thumb, and he praised this bill at 2 a.m. this morning, so that's a done deal. Any House member could deny unanimous consent and stop this, but that would require getting to Washington, forcing everyone else back to Washington in the middle of a pandemic, and delay what is needed, if temporary relief for everyday people. I doubt anybody will do it. Pelosi purposefully put this in place before turning to remote voting to make such an action toxic. Democrats will instead whine from the sidelines as money is pushed into the hands of corporate elites. That's what they like to do. No agency and ineffectual grandstanding. Someday, Larry Kudlow will write a book called Firefighting about how he saved the economy in between board meetings of the 6 companies left in the country, and we'll wonder how things got so off track. Don't wonder. Now, there's a great thing underneath this with vital stats and different sources and links to click on, and just all kinds of awesome information that I'm not going to get to right now, but you should definitely check out the article and read into it further. There's all kinds of great info being provided. So vital stats from the New York Times, Johns Hopkins University, talking about the deaths at the time. Check this out. He was on a broadcast with Brad Feeman talking about coronavirus-related issues. Defense Production Act, a postscript. Today I learned just a bunch of great links from David Dayen, and you should check them out. Now, and now we're going to get into how this bill will affect you. That's what we're going to do. So, okay. So let's get right into this other article in the American Prospect called Unsanitize the Essential Imbalance of the 2020 Bailout. Plus, it may be time for a general strike. This is the COVID-19 Daily Report for March 26, 2020, which is the day after the previous article I read. This is by David Dayen again. Dayen, check them out. March 26, 2020, 10:45. I'll also have this link at the bottom in the description of the video. First response. Last night, the Senate approved the $2.2 trillion coronavirus economic response package an hour after the final text was released in a remarkable 96-0 vote. This morning, we learned that 3.283 million Americans filed first-time jobless claims in the week ending March 21st. The latter explains the former. We're in at least a temporary pandemic depression, and the relief that the Senate bill will provide was such that no senator would have dared vote against it. The House will vote on Friday, and without remote voting in place, no House member will be the one to deny unanimous consent and force their colleagues back to Washington, risking their own health, on a bill that will get overwhelming support. That was the whole point of the foot dragging on remote voting, to make dissent impossible. He's talking about how Nancy Pelosi and others said that Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic House Speaker, the Speaker of the House, the majority in the House of Representatives, said that she was not going to vote, not going to allow remote voting even during this pandemic. Congress should at least consider what it bought, however. I made some of these points last night on Chris Hayes' show. That's on MSNBC. But let's take a look at how this package treats the various players who will get help. Direct payments. This is touted as that every American will get a $1,200 check in the mail to deal with the economic collapse. But it's means tested, so it's really every American earning $75,000 or less, phasing out at $100,000. But it's also means tested in the worst possible way, based on IRS data from 2018. As I just mentioned, 3.283 million Americans filed jobless claims last week. Did some of them make $100,000 a year in 2018? It's certainly possible. Well, they'll get nothing from this provision. Means testing is stupid under normal conditions. Means testing based on 2-year-old data is insane. The easy fix was to give the check to everyone and claw it back next year if you must means test based on 2020 tax data. That method was in Nancy Pelosi's aid package, but that bill was for show. It's also what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representative of in the Bronx and Queens, suggested, and it makes a lot more sense. Meanwhile, we'll be lucky if the people who need this money the most will still be at the address where the check will be mailed. If you have direct deposit on file with the IRS, about 70 million Americans, you will get that money within a few weeks. If you don't, the check will be mailed, and it will take up to 4 months. The unbanked don't have direct deposit. These are the most vulnerable people in society, and they may not be able to hold out for 4 months. They're also transient, so the address on file may not match. Transient means like homeless, or, bouncing around homeless, in and out of, staying with people. If we had postal banking on a Federal Reserve linked bank account for all, this transmission would be direct and simple. We don't. Unemployment boost. I think most liberals agree this is the highlight of the bill. A $600 week increase in unemployment insurance. Combined with the normal state-based benefit, this means that everyone out of work making up to $75,000 a year will have their salary replaced at 100%. It includes gig workers, freelancers, independent contractors, and furloughed workers, many of whom were ineligible for the system previously. But this benefit will be run through state unemployment insurance systems, a creaky patchwork of varying quality that is mostly unprepared for the crush of claims. Systems in 22 states aren't ready for a recession level of unemployment claims, the Wall Street Journal reports, which is astounding since we've had a decade of job growth. Most states never replenished the trust funds after the Great Recession. That can be handled with federal dollars. The bigger problem is the throughput of these underfunded systems. Check out any local news site and you'll find stories about systems being overwhelmed, people getting kicked off the online portal, on hold with the call center, having to fill out online applications 15 times. I went through this myself. There are also all sorts of conditions on state employment, many of which are being waived, but that depends heavily on the state. It's great to increase unemployment, but people must suffer with the mechanism of delivery, and that's bound to create people slipping through the cracks. Small business grants. Small businesses get $350 billion in what are called forgivable loans, which will be forgiven if they maintain payroll. That's a lifeline for millions of businesses. It will also be run through the Small Business Administration, universally recognized as one of the worst agencies in the federal government. Stacy Mitchell of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance explains to me that the SBA typically does about $25 to $30 billion a year in 7A loans for operating capital. This would be a 12-fold scale-up of a normal year and would have to be done in weeks to actually succeed in saving businesses. Small businesses routinely complain of the slowness of the SBA process. Mitchell heard that the website is already crashing. We're also all going to learn that the definition of small business isn't that small. Not only to businesses with up to 499 workers make the cut, and that includes those with multiple locations, as long as those locations have less than 500 employees. That could open up the grants to chain restaurants and chain hotels. Donald Trump's hotel chain, though banned from the big business provisions of the bill, could grab this small business cash. So the actual small businesses on a knife's edge must compete with these larger concerns for the attention of a broken SBA. Hospital industry. This is also good. Over $100 billion for hospitals struggling under the weight of new COVID-19 cases. Some of that money will go toward procuring needed equipment. Yet, by giving it to hospitals directly instead of nationalizing the supply chain, the money will necessarily buy less. Hospitals will remain pitted against one another amid a small chain of producers, subject to monopsony price gouging. If this money were put into a Defense Production Act fund, the government would balance the scales, controlling supply and coordinating it to who needs it most. Excuse me a second. I take a little drinky poo. State and local governments. They get $150 billion, which is great since states can't print money and stand to lose lots of tax revenue. But governors are already warning that this won't be enough, and they'll have to get in line for a future appropriation. $4.5 trillion corporate money cannon. There are a whole bunch of goodies for specific industries in the bill, but this is the most instructive one. While individuals and small businesses must survive through creaky, inadequate systems not equipped to handle such extreme reliance, corporate America gets the velvet rope service of the Federal Reserve, which can hit a keystroke and fund a company to its heart's content in seconds. The conditions on the lending are vaporware and can be reversed by the Treasury Secretary at his discretion. The collateral is theoretical. It's a rerun of the mother of all carry traders from the financial crisis, where corporations can more than easily make money on the mounds of cash they'll be given. The oversight is all after the fact, making reports after the money is out the door. So we know the money is disproportionate, as is the power dynamic, but it's also the service. This is a symbol of who matters in America and who matters in this bill. Congress will have to be relentless in making sure that the relief for the most vulnerable doesn't arrive too late or break under the pressure, while relief for executives and elites will float on a cloud. Let's get into, there's some more vital stats again and some things. Again, the article will be in the description. But let's read this real quick. There's talk of a general strike. That was said to me and labor reporter Mike Elk in 2011 in Madison, Wisconsin, during the worker uprising there against Scott Walker by a guy wearing an Industrial Workers of the World hat. And if Donald Trump tries to prematurely send people back to work amid a pandemic, that talk will grow. In fact, it's already happening. Employees at a Purdue chicken plant walked out in Georgia. Trash collectors in Pittsburgh walked out, citing insufficient equipment. Bus drivers in Birmingham, Alabama. Amazon warehouse workers in Queens, New York. And with at least 10 warehouses testing positive, expect more of that. Domino's delivery workers, auto workers. Heck, we're in a movement where the Cheesecake Factory is getting radical and going on a rent strike. There's a history here. A general strike occurred in 1919 during the influenza pandemic. You cannot credibly send workers into a meat grinder without pushback. Chinese factory workers were slow to return as well. The only way to return America to normal is to beat the pandemic with social distancing and lockdown measures. There are no shortcuts, and attempts to create one will be met with massive unrest. Wow. Just a lot of information there, and we're going to be getting into it in further videos, so I'm just going to make this as brief as possible. It is clear, as he said, David Dayen said in the article, that who's being protected here, who matters, and large corporations are being propped up with all this cash that's costing the taxpayer, while some people will be waiting up to 4 months or more for a check, while they can't pay their rent, can't buy food, can't buy supplies, can't buy hand sanitizer, can't buy the things that they need. This is absurd. And the fact that the leadership in the House and Senate would not vote remotely during a pandemic to force through a $4.25 trillion or so handout to the wealthy and largest corporations, while so many Americans will not be able to get a check, the homeless, people who have changed, people whose incomes have changed since the 2018 tax returns. I mean, this is absurd. So I'm going to show you what Bernie Sanders is saying on some of these matters, and I'm just going to keep pumping out videos. Please go to patreon.com/punkrockpolitics and become a member. You can become a member for as little as $1 a month. That's right, just $1, seriously. And, I would encourage you to go to the higher tiers. The next tier is $2.70 a month. And if you really don't like it, at the first of every month, you can actually cancel the payment, which is kind of not the greatest for me, but it gives you some hey, I don't like what's going on here. I don't think it's good. I don't like this channel. I don't want to pay for it, and you can cancel, as it's my understanding. But either way, you could start for just $1 a month. So please, please, please become a patron. Check out, please feel free to go to Punk Rock Politics 1, my page on Facebook, and check out the articles I already shared and like and share them, or share directly from patreon.com/punkrockpolitics, or Facebook or YouTube. Please get out the word, and let's keep punk rock politics going for a long time. Make it sustainable, make it more efficient, make it so that I can just work on just this and pump out video after video every day, like a lot of these guys get to do that have been at it for a while, because they have members that pay on Patreon. On patreon.com, they're called patrons. So become a member or become a patron at patreon.com/punkrockpolitics. Please support punk rock politics. Stay safe out there. Practice social distancing whenever you can. Be adamant about it. And we're going to get into a lot of these issues. So I know I didn't give much background on this particular bill, but I'm going to get into it in future videos, and we're going to explore some more. So it's just atrocious what happened with this bill, and the next bill must rectify it. In fact, they should have a bill, in my opinion, not even in my opinion, if we are having a just society, that puts way more restrictions on corporations than what was put in the last bill, and actually addresses the previous bill, the third stimulus, so-called stimulus. So thanks again. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Check out patreon.com/punkrockpolitics and become a patron today. Thank you very much. Have a good night and be safe.